It was a summer night, and the sky was dotted with twinkling stars. A gentle breeze whispered through the trees, creating a constant murmur in the forest. In the heart of this dark and isolated forest, a group of 4 friends had gathered for a camping trip. Their names were Alex, Sarah, Mark, and Emily. Excited by the prospect of a night in the open air, they spread out their tents and lit a fire, which rose in golden flames, casting a dancing light upon their eager faces. The friends spent the early hours of the night laughing, roasting marshmallows and telling scary stories around the campfire. The laughter mixed with the night sounds of the forest, creating a warm and welcoming atmosphere. However, as the horror stories unfolded, an idea began to grow in the mind of Alex, the group's leader. "You've heard about the abandoned cemetery, haven't you?" Alex asked, looking at his friends with a gleam of excitement in his eyes. The others looked at him with curiosity and a bit of apprehension. The abandoned cemetery was a local legend, a place few dared to visit. It was said to be hidden somewhere in the forest, lost in time and oblivion. Mark frowned. "What are you up to, Alex?" The leader smiled mysteriously. "Just an idea to make our night more exciting. They say the cemetery is a short walk from here. Who wants to venture into the dark forest and find out if the legend is true?" Emily and Sarah exchanged nervous glances, but the excitement of Alex's proposal quickly won out. Everyone agreed to accept the challenge, although with some hesitation. With flashlights in hand, the group left the camp behind and ventured into the shadowy forest. The nighttime sounds of nature became louder and more unsettling as they advanced. The rustling of leaves and nighttime chirps created a feeling of isolation. The only light that guided them was that of the lanterns, which cast dancing shadows on the trees and the ground covered in dry leaves. After a walk that seemed to last forever, they found what they were looking for, the abandoned cemetery. Old, broken tombstones stood in disarray, some covered in moss and others barely legible. The full moon illuminated the site, casting a ghostly light on the neglected graves. The atmosphere was charged with mystery, and a feeling of uneasiness came over them. But like any group of young adventurers, curiosity compelled them to explore further. They began to roam the cemetery, examining the inscriptions on the tombstones and speculating about the lives of those who lay there. As they explored the place, the friends began to hear strange and unsettling sounds echoing through the dark forest. Soft footsteps, as if someone was following them, and whispering laughter that seemed to merge with the night breeze. A feeling that they were being watched enveloped them. The group exchanged nervous glances, but Alex tried to dispel their fears. "It must just be our imagination. There's no one here but us." Sarah looked around, her eyes fixed on the unsettling shadows. "Are you sure? This is getting weird." Mark nodded uneasily. "I heard those sounds too. It doesn't sound like imagination." Emily, the most skeptical of the group, tried to smile to calm her friends. "Probably just the normal sounds of the forest. Let's keep exploring. There's no reason to panic." So they continued on, trying to ignore the inexplicable sounds that surrounded them. However, the atmosphere became increasingly tense, and the abandoned cemetery looked even more sinister under the light of the full moon. None of them knew that night, their adventure would take an unexpected turn, plunging them into a nightmare that would challenge their conceptions of reality and lead them to face their deepest fears. As the group continued to explore the abandoned cemetery, the feeling that they were being watched did not leave them. The strange sounds persisted, like whispering laughter that seemed to come from the shadows of the trees. Mark clutched the flashlight tightly in his hand, and Emily glanced nervously over her shoulder. It was at that moment that Alex, the expedition leader, had an idea. He suggested that they split up to explore the cemetery more quickly, believing that this would dispel the feeling of restlessness. However, he had an ulterior motive for this decision. He wanted to get closer to the most mysterious point in the cemetery, a solitary tombstone in the center of the ground. The friends agreed to the division and reluctantly separated. Alex approached the tombstone in the center, which looked older and more mysterious than the others. It was larger than the others, and the inscription was covered in moss, making it almost illegible. As Alex tried to wipe off the inscription with the sleeve of his jacket, a dark shadow moved nearby. He raised the flashlight and illuminated the place, but there was no one there. However, the feeling that someone was watching him intensified. Back with the others, Sarah began to feel a strange presence while examining a broken tombstone. She raised the flashlight, illuminating the surrounding trees, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. It was as if something was hiding in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Mark, in turn, felt chills run down his spine as he explored the furthest part of the cemetery. The nighttime sounds of the forest intensified, creating a cacophony of unsettling noises. The whispering laughter continued to echo, becoming more and more disturbing. Emily, the last of the group, found herself in front of a moss-covered tombstone that seemed to have a more legible inscription than the others. When she approached and shined a light on the tombstone, his heart froze. The inscription read, "Those who awaken the sleeping spirit will face their dark fate." What did this mean? Emily felt a chill run down her spine and instinctively turned to look for her friends. However, they were all a considerable distance away, and the feeling that something was wrong only grew. Suddenly, a sharp, shrill sound cut through the air, making all of the friends jump. It was a scream coming from Alex's direction, who was near the central tombstone. The others ran towards him, their flashlights cutting through the darkness of the night. They found Alex standing before the central tombstone, his face pale with terror. His flashlight trembled in his hand, and his gaze was fixed on the inscription on the tombstone. "What happened?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking. Alex finally managed to speak, his voice whispering with fear. "I heard a voice. It called me by name. It told me to join them, to awaken the sleeping spirit." Mark swallowed. This is insane. It must be some kind of sick joke. But as they discussed what had happened, the whispering laughter that echoed through the trees became louder and closer. It seemed as if the forest itself was laughing at them. The whispering laughter that echoed through the forest intensified, as if the trees themselves were laughing at their friends' fear. Everyone looked around, flashlights shaking, as the feeling that something supernatural was happening consumed them. Alex, still shaken by the call he had heard, stuttered. "This is not a joke. Something is happening here. We must leave immediately." Sarah was on the verge of tears. "How? We don't know where to go. And these sounds. We can't ignore them." Emily examined the central tombstone again, its chilling inscription echoing in her mind. The inscription says something about awakening the sleeping spirit. "What does it mean?" Mark, apprehensive, replied, "I don't know, but we must stick together. Let's go back to camp." The friends began to retreat, still hearing the whispering laughter, when something extraordinary happened. A shadowy figure emerged from the shadows of the trees, slithering toward them. The light of the full moon illuminated a grotesque silhouette dressed in black, with eyes that glowed in a disturbing way. Terror gripped the group. They were paralyzed, unable to move or scream. The figure approached slowly, its skeletal hands reaching towards them. A whispering, inhuman voice filled the air, speaking incomprehensible words. Alex was the first to feel the strange pull of the shadowy figure. His body involuntarily moved towards her, as if an invisible force was pulling him. He tried to fight, but he was powerless against the power that controlled him. Then Sarah found herself enchanted by the figure. Her eyes met the creature's glowing eyes, and she felt her body being dragged towards it. Mark and Emily, terrified, watched helplessly as their friends were dragged closer to the shadowy figure. The figure continued to whisper unintelligible words as his friends joined him in a macabre dance under the light of the full moon. Their movements were clumsy and controlled, like puppets in the hands of an invisible master. Whatever was happening, it was as if the very darkness of the forest was swallowing them, making them part of something much darker and more sinister. Mark and Emily, terrified, realized it was time to act. Mark grabbed his flashlight and shined the light on the shadowy figure. The creature backed away, its glowing eyes twitching at the intensity of the light. The whispering laugh became a high-pitched, disturbing scream. It was enough time for Alex and Sarah, still under the creature's control, to fight the spell that was keeping them prisoner. With a combined effort, the friends threw flames from their lanterns towards the shadowy figure. She retreated further, writhing in pain in the light of the fire that now spread across the abandoned cemetery. The inhuman voice turned into a howl of fury, and the shadowy figure finally disappeared into the shadows of the forest, as if the firelight had banished it. The sense of control over their friends was lifted, and they felt freed from the sinister influence that had enveloped them. Breathless and shaking, the group fled the abandoned cemetery, rushing back to camp where the safety of the campfire dispelled the terror that had haunted them. Their minds were full of unanswered questions, but the certainty that they had faced something supernatural was undeniable. The experience in the abandoned cemetery would become a memory of a terrifying night they would never forget, a horror story they would share with others to warn them never to explore macabre places after dark. But what, or who, was the shadowy figure, and what the sinister inscription on the central tombstone meant, would remain a mystery that would torment them for the rest of their lives. After escaping the abandoned cemetery and the terrifying encounter with the shadowy figure, the friends spent the rest of the night by the campfire, trying to calm down and understand what had happened. The shadows of the forest seemed less threatening in the firelight, but fear still haunted them. "What was that thing?" Mark asked, his voice still shaky. Emily looked at the inscription on the central tombstone, the memory of what was written still disturbing her. That inscription said something about awakening the sleeping spirit. "What do you think that means?" Alex looked thoughtfully at the fire, trying to organize his thoughts. It seemed like the shadowy figure was trying to lure us in, as if it wanted to make us part of something sinister. Sarah nodded. It was as if we were being controlled, unable to resist. Mark looked at the fire, his expression serious. "I think the abandoned cemetery is a cursed place, and the shadowy figure was a manifestation of that curse. Maybe it's a vengeful spirit or something even more sinister." The friends remained silent for a moment, contemplating the inexplicable nature of what they had witnessed. Finally, Emily broke the silence. "Whatever happened, I think we should tell others about this experience. It could be dangerous for anyone who decides to explore that place." Alex agreed, and they promised never to return to the abandoned cemetery. The next day, as the sun shone over the camp, they shared the story with the other campers, warning them of the danger they could encounter there. Word spread, and the abandoned cemetery gained a reputation for being haunted. Local residents avoided it at all costs, and curious people who tried to explore it after dark were never seen again. However, the mystery behind the ominous inscription on the central tombstone and the nature of the shadowy figure remained an enigma. The friends could never fully understand what they had witnessed that terrifying night. Years passed, and they moved on with their lives, but the story of the abandoned cemetery and the shadowy figure remained a horror memory they would never forget. It was an experience that bonded them forever, a reminder that the unknown and the supernatural can lurk in the shadows of the night, ready to turn a simple exploration into a terrifying fight for survival. The story of the abandoned cemetery has become a local legend, a kind of warning about the dangers that can arise when challenging the unknown. And as the friends went on with their lives, they always wondered what really happened that night and what the inscription on the central tombstone meant. The mystery of the abandoned cemetery would remain unanswered, a horror story that would echo through the generations, fueling the imagination of those who heard it.